broadcasting live from the Roanoke Valley of southwestern Virginia. Join us and see what life looks like from a medium's perspective with Reverend Tracey Lockwood, the medium's medium. We'll explore the tools of psychic development, hear stories and experiences from the other side, and learn to listen to our natural intuition. Now, our host, Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Before we get too deep in today's show, I just wanted to remind you that I offer a lot of options for training your abilities and also to certify your abilities. Not that you need certification for your skills, but it's a certification program that allows you to be exposed to a variety of concepts that are central to the development of psychic mediumship. I have a professional psychic mediumship certification program, a 12-week program that I teach twice a year, and it's about to start here on August 13th. I teach it in February and August of each year. And I also offer once a year a spirit art series that's a 4-week program, and a channeling tutoring series that's a 4-week program as well. And I teach one-on-one. So if you're interested in developing your abilities, or if you're interested in a private reading, please feel free to see me. More information on my website at mediumtracylockwood.com. Now, I am totally honored to bring today's guest to you. She has had some, I don't know if she's part of the Rainbow Light Trust. I'll find that out from her shortly. But some of our previous guests, Carol Lamb and Jennifer Waters from the Rainbow Light Trust, have been with us talking about sound healing. And we've had, I think, even more. Sandra Lamb was on with us too. But our guest today is... Well, she began her postgraduate training in metaphysics in 2002, and she started studying energy medicine and holistic therapies with the Academy of Spiritual Sciences. And she bought a small harp, and Carol Lamb, who's the founder of the Rainbow Light Trust, encouraged her to teach herself to play intuitively. And she didn't really know what that meant. She had played the guitar and the mandolin before, but she didn't ever try her hand at creating music, and she was kind of curious about how that process would be. Well, she learned the principles of energy alignment through the meditations, and we've even played one of them here. It's called the Emerald Alignment on a previous show. And she found that the music just began to flow really spontaneously for her. And the further she disengaged her mind and allowed things to just come naturally, the more amazing the music was. And she started sort of channeling music, that's what we would call it here, by allowing different musical influences coming through her music to flow. And she started to compose some pieces. And then through the practice of yoga, she started to become interested in cellular and muscle memory. And that's now the key focus of her work. And she now plays her music in community care settings. She offers her services in a vibrational healing clinic that's located in Halifax, West Yorkshire, UK. And she's created a vibrational healing HARP manual, and she teaches others in established heart alignment. And she's here today to talk to us about the link between music and our DNA. And her name is Rebecca Penkett. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hello, Tracey, and thank you for inviting me onto the show.
My honor, incredibly so. For those of you that are listening and like to check out our guests as we move through our show, her website is harpalignment.net. You might need to put www before that to get it. harpalignment.net if you want to check out Rebecca Penkett. So, well, this is just great. What an unusual avocation you've chosen. Oh.
Actually, there is just one thing about my work with music and the cells. It's more focused on the work of the cell membrane rather than the actual DNA.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Differentiate that for our listeners. I know a little bit, but you are the specialist. So tell us why you chose that distinction. What's important about that?
It was really through reading work by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a cell biologist, and also Dr. Candace Pert, who's a neurobiologist. And they've written quite extensively. Candace Pert's book is Molecules of Emotion, and Bruce Lipton's book is The Biology of Belief, but they refer to the cell membrane, which is the outer shell, as it were, of the cell. And what Bruce Lipton had done was, a lot of people think that the brain, as it were, of the cell is the DNA, but research that he did, I think it was back in the 80s, where he would take out the DNA and still discovered that the cell thrived. But if they removed the cell membrane, the cell would die. And it's all about the sort of the connection between as Candace Pert describes, the molecules of emotion, which affect the environment, is affecting receptors on the cell. So if you can imagine the cell being like a ball, the outside layer being a ball, and on the ball there would be lots of dots on the ball, and each of those dots, we're talking thousands here, are actually what they call a receptor. And then you've got what they describe as a ligand, which is a word which is a Latin word, and it means to bind. And there are various examples of ligands, but if I use one, say a hormone could act as a ligand, and it then will vibrate in resonance with one of the receptors on the cell, and then it will change the shape of that receptor. So it's a bit like the ligand is a key, and you can imagine the receptor sort of being like a gate lock, and then once the key opens the gate lock, it then can go create activity within the cell, so whatever needs to be done. So for example, the hormone will change the activity of that cell. And then also what they describe is it's not just our hormones, it's many things. If we're stressed, we create a stressful environment that will send certain molecules of emotions to our cells, so then they will respond in certain ways. And really it's about our belief systems can change our, the structure of our cells. But in Candace Pert's book, she also mentions a man called Eric Kandel, and he's also a neurologist, and he did research into realizing that the receptors also store memory within the cells. So he realized that the cellular binding can affect the neuronal circuitry in our brains, and then that would influence the memory and the thought processes. So on a subconscious and sort of level, the memory is actually stored within the cell's receptor, and they sort of respond to what is a positive or a negative event. And then Candace Pert then also goes on to say that that music can bypass the ligand, so it can resonate directly with the receptor on a cell membrane, and therefore interact in the same way that, for example, a hormone would, but it can do it directly. and the vibrational frequency of musical notes will resonate with the receptor to actually direct the cellular activity. And so this demonstrates how music can be used to harm or to heal, obviously depending on the type of music that you're playing. And it also demonstrates how music can actually release memory at the cellular level.
That is just mind-blowing, and I immediately begin thinking about our auric field and how thoughts create things, and think about the fact that our cells, you know, I think of us as being sort of the leading edge of divine self-expression, as Esther Hicks calls it, you know, where we're sort of the face of the divine stretched out into physical space. And I think about the fact that we have an auric field that changes in effect to the thoughts and stresses that we have, and that affects our body. And it's just so fascinating to think about that occurring at another scale, no pun intended.
Yes. Oh, yes,
That's
yes.
just amazing. That's just amazing.
Yes, yes. Well, of course, as well, they talk about the gate lock and the key, and then you've got musical keys, haven't you?
Yes, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that is marvelous. Wow. Well, you know, I guess I want to just get you to continue to talk about maybe how music does continue to affect the energy field. You sort of indicated that it can change us and affect the cells directly with positive or negative effect. I've seen that thing on YouTube, and I think there's a book about it, about how water molecules respond to positive or negative words that are just pasted on the side of the glass. If it says love, they start creating an ordered structure. If it's hate, they sort of mutate and metastasize into something not so pretty. Talk to us a little bit about that, and yeah, run with that.
Well, that is the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, and he passed away, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, but he was a scientist in Japan. And his work was, he had a special camera that could photograph water molecules at a very microscopic level. And what they would do is they would write on a glass a word, say, for example, truth, and then they would leave it for a period of time, and then they would come back and freeze the water. And at the point that the water was just frozen, they would take a photograph of it. And that's what you're describing, those images of those crystals. And so if it was a word like truth, it would create a very beautiful, strongly structured crystal that would look very pure. And then, for example, they used another word, blasphemy. And the photograph of that, like you were saying, it looks broken down, it's chaotic, there's something a bit mutated about it. And they also did work with music. So they did Mozart's 40th Symphony, which also looks like a really beautiful crystal. And then they did some heavy metal music, which again looks very broken down and mutated. And what it was really demonstrating is the importance of sound, and how the structure of sound, if it's positive, can be very strong and harmonious. Yet if it's something that's a negative sound, it can be destructive and can break things down. There was a lady called Dorothy Retilak. This is slightly different, but she did work in the 1970s on plants and played different types of music. And again, it was she played some heavy rock music to a plant. I think it was for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then in another room played some classical music to a plant, the same type of plant. And the one that had the heavy metal music looked rather wilted and sad and as if it was dying. And the one that had the classical music, you could see it was really flourishing and had really grown really well. So it shows that the power of positive, harmonious music and sound, and how it can affect ourselves as well, our bodies.
It makes me jump to the concept of our chakras, the different energy centers that run up our body. And if you think about where heavy metal resonates, it's definitely in those lower chakras. You might get up to the heart chakra with that kind of adrenaline rush, but it has sort of a tightening effect, because it's mainly in the root. And
it's in the lower, the base.
Yeah. And then Mozart, you're a great example there. It hits all the chakras, and of course that's the balance. Yes. And I had someone, it's odd, never a coincidence. I had someone on my show last week that was talking about Haydn and how he only dealt with the top 4 chakras, and how that differentiated from Mozart's music, which you demonstrate as, explain as being very healing. What would you say about the difference between maybe Mozart and Haydn? What would you say?
I mean, I have to say, I've not really looked into the actual differences within the healing of those different types of music. I just know when I listen to them, I find them very healing. So
yes, I always feel sort of complete and expanded when I listen to Mozart. Haydn, it feels more intellectual to me.
Right.
It doesn't affect me the same way. It's not. It's interesting. It's
yes. I have to say, I've never really noticed that, but then I haven't thought about sort of observing it. So
oh no, it was interesting just because it was mentioned on the previous show. I was thinking. And he was a tarot master, so it had nothing to do with sound healing.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So, talk to us a little bit more about just the healing sound vibration, and you're already touching on the definition of what is healing music, but maybe take that a little further if you wish.
Sort of what do you mean in that?
Well, I was just thinking, how would you describe healing music if you were going to put it in a concise
I see.
term?
Yeah. Well, I would describe that as harmonious music. So I don't know that so many people know this, but Pythagoras actually brought to us what is the basis of our Western music scale. So the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or C, D, E, F, G, A, B, the 7-note scale. And I mean, it was said that actually he learned about this by going to ancient Egypt and also to Persia and Babylon. But he was very specific about the ratios between the different pitches, the 7 pitches. So, and they were mathematically structured. I mean, it all really goes into the overtones, but they're mathematically proportioned in a harmonious way. So the pitch you can describe as, the higher the pitch, the more cycles per second that vibration is moving in. And so he was very, very particular that the music was to be played within using those 7 notes. I don't know if you've heard of a man called Schoenberg, but he used music in what they call the chromatic scale. So when you look at a piano, you've got all the white keys, which is your do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and then you've got the semitones, the black keys, which if you want to play in different keys, so in the key of G, for example, but you would still only use 7 notes unless you're striking what they call accidentals. Now, what Schoenberg did was he said, oh, you can just use all 12 of those notes from the chromatic scale. And whereas Pythagoras would say, well, that is not music. Pythagoras described the word music, he would have described it as purification. And he only used the word music to actually describe music as medicine. And he'd had set up an ancient school, a mystery school in Croton or Crotona in what is now southern Italy. At the time, it was part of Greece. And amongst other things that they learned at the school, he taught about the healing power of music. And, people would come to the Pythagoreans, as they were known, to have healing music. And he would actually prescribe certain remedies of music for different ailments for people. And he's quoted as saying, music heals. So.
Yes. Oh, and, back to the concept of chakras, I had a brain injury in 2003 from a car wreck. And and I had never been attracted to heavy metal before, but the accident was so profound. I mean, I wasn't hospitalized for it, but it was a dramatic shift in my life and my abilities. And so it was sort of like beginning again, like starting from the ground up. And I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and listening to heavy metal, like death metal, like really, and it was like brain candy to me. And it made me think that maybe because it's kind of a jump to go from heavy metal to classical, from the first chakra to the highest chakra, that maybe I was working my way up. Now I appreciate it. I remember the days, but I don't choose it as a background for me sound-wise. Now I prefer different international musics. I like classic Spanish guitar. I like, I listen to the Om when I do my stretches in the morning, that kind of thing. But I'm wondering, have you found that either within a piece or within a series of pieces that you can sort of bring someone along in that sense?
And bring them along, what, from heavy metal music?
Yeah, or not necessarily like doing heavy metal on the mic, but like in the piece itself, like sort of maybe addressing those lower tones and vibrations and bringing it up. Like when you compose, what have you there you go.
You see, if I use the example of when I'm playing the harp in a therapeutic setting at my vibrational healing clinic, what I had to do was, when I learned to play the harp, this was the advice that Carol had given me, was I had to learn not to think. So I had to learn to, you have to have your mind engaged enough, because otherwise you're asleep, but I had to be consciously aware, but not to think about what was happening. So
same state that we go into as mediums, in order to give an accurate reading, we have to get in that state between sleep and wake, where we're not drooling and passing out, but at the same time, that we're not really we're detached, but not in a cold way, but just disengaged from the information that comes through. So I relate to what the state of mind that you must go into in order to, I would call it channel music.
Yes, it is channeling music. But I'm actually, if I start thinking about, this person needs this, I can't play. So I when it comes through, it's almost as if it's coming through me. So I don't really think about any of that. I just let my hand go.
And like in trance healing, we've had people on the show to talk about that, and they consider it almost like improper or a violation to try to figure out yourself by scanning and thinking like, what's wrong, and they ask you to detach and
Yes.
let the energies flow with you. And it's so similar. And I just am fascinated by your particular expression there. Sorry,
No, that's fine. I mean, something else that does happen, because I play a combination of what I call purely intuitive, where I feel like I'm in the audience and I don't know what's coming next. And I'm often quite surprised, my hand moves and sometimes it plays fast or slow, or it plays lower or higher. I observe it in a therapy setting, and I sort of am aware of a sensation of it feels uplifting, or words might pop in my head like waterfall, so when I write my notes afterwards, I can write those notes because they are describing something of the emotion and the feeling of the music.
Yes.
And the other thing that does happen is I also play some of the composed pieces that have come through, and when that happens, when it is a composed piece, what tends to happen is when I've finished a piece of music, I do this strumming action, and that strumming is really what clients describe as a cleansing of their cells. They say they can feel it feels like a body scrub of their cells. Now that's where what I was describing earlier, what's going on in the cell membrane, and that I'm presuming that will be because what the music's doing is it's cleansing the cells, you see.
Yes.
And when I'm just finishing up that, it slows towards the end, I then hear a piece of music, say the Swan, and then I go and play that next. But if I don't hear a piece of music, then I know I'm just going to play something purely intuitive. So it's very much, it's guided in the moment, really.
Yeah. How beautiful. How extraordinarily beautiful. It's just amazing. It's just not something that you hear about much today.
Oh.
I've been fortunate to have a couple of sound healers on the show before, and it's just fascinating to think about how color and sound and light and love and all of those do change our resonance and our vibration.
I mean, something that has been very key to me in learning this process was, Carol teaching me and training me, and also Jennifer Waters, who you mentioned earlier. And Jennifer has taught me the rainbow chakra tones, and that really helped me to understand about the different chakras and the healing power of sound vibration. So that was another thing really that was key in those early stages. We talk about how meditation helped me, the emerald alignment helped me, and also the toning. It was life-changing.
Now back to our show from a medium's perspective, with host Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Welcome back. We're glad you're with us. If you missed the first half of our show or need to listen to past episodes to discover some of the amazing topics that have been covered, they're here on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, please subscribe. We would love to have you as part of the channel here. We've been just having a fantastic discussion, and I want to remind them about your website, which is harpalignment.net. And again, may need the www before it in order to find it on the web. We've been talking about different aspects of music affecting our cellular structure and memory. Tell us just a minute, like I had kind of connected for myself the fact that the cellular level was sort of like the auric field level of our bodies or something, the different scale there. How would you say that music affects the human energy field?
Well, what it can do, obviously, it does affect the cellular level and clears the pathways, but it actually can sort of release pain from the body. And when you can release those pains, it can increase the flow throughout the chakra system, the meridians, and also the subtle energy bodies. So I'm talking about the physical body, the emotional body, and the mental body, and the spiritual body, because it's working at a vibratory rate. So the energy field vibrates at different frequencies. So the music can actually, some people say this is sort of to describe it, music touches the parts that other things can't reach, because it's working at a vibratory rate, at a subtle rate.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about music raising our vibration, but that's so general, it's a powerful thing, but it is general. But I love how you said that. Yeah.
I mean, it does, obviously, it depends on the music as well, because if it's sort of a debased type of music, then that will lower our frequency and our vibration. But like, as we said earlier, if you keep listening to Mozart, then it will raise your vibration.
Yeah. And everything between to kind of bridge that gap and bring people forward. It's just so interesting. And I love the fact that your music being inspired and being channeled, it's so specific to that person too. Why the harp? Like, you play mandolin and guitar too?
Yes.
So
well, when I played guitar, there was actually a piece called Romanza. It's quite well known. It's you can look it up, Romanza on the guitar. It's lovely. And that was why I took up the guitar. But it was because that was finger picking. And I just loved the sound of the finger picking. And then the mandolin, I led on to that because I was just in a music shop with a friend, and my friend had said, "Oh, that's the sound of, that sound." And I said, "Oh, I love that sound." So I ended up buying a mandolin and bought myself a tutor book and taught myself to play. And then it was the following year when this is now 2002, I was on the Healing Energies course being taught by Carol and Jennifer. And one of my friends, for her 30th birthday, her husband bought her a small harp. Well, I didn't know that small harps existed. And I realized I'd sort of harbored a secret desire to own a harp, but I'd put it out my head because I thought, oh, they're so big, I'm never going to get it in my house, and it's too expensive, and I'd just put it out my head. But when I saw that, I contacted the man who made her harp, and he had one already made up, and I went and bought it, and
wow.
And then and then it led on that I then started to learn to play it from a tutor book with this friend of mine, and then I said to Carol, "Oh, I'm learning to play this from a tutor book," and she just looked at me and gently suggested that I put the book away and just close my eyes, do the emerald alignment, close my eyes, and just see what happens. And as you said in the introduction, I was sort of thinking, well, how on earth am I going to be able to do that? How am I going to create music? But it did come through. But I've always loved the sound of the harp, and the plucked sound of the harp. It's just something else,
Yes, it's extremely soothing. Would you mind letting them hear perhaps one of your pieces here? Which one would you like me to start with?
It's probably good to start with Golden Voyage, because that one is one of those where I say I just let my hand go, and that's completely, an intuitive, I don't know what's coming next, because that's where I started. And then by doing that, I then led on, my fingers would start making a pattern, and I'd have to pay attention to, what are they doing? And then slowly and steadily the pattern, I'd remember that bit of the pattern, then the next bit would come along, and the next bit, and pieces of music came through. So yeah, if we start with Golden Voyage.
All right, here we go. How lovely.
Thank you.
Tell us about it.
That particular piece, it's funny again, because I'm not sort of so mentally present. I can't really describe it. It was a piece I recorded back. It was 10 years ago now, so it would have just been a result of what had happened to me that day and that night, when I thought, right, I'm going to keep recording different pieces and eventually choose some of them to go on an album, and that was one that happened to come on that particular day. So,
it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. It really transports.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, something I do notice is when I play for myself, I realize that it's something to do with me and my feelings. So I would also notice, say, if I was feeling a bit sad, it would sound melancholic. If I was feeling quite happy, it would sound really quite uplifting. But when I'm playing at the Vibrational Healing Clinic, I notice that the music isn't relating to my feelings, because I know I'm not really aware of what my feelings are doing. I'm trying to get myself out of the way, but I'm just aware. I can feel it is different than when I play on my own in my house for me. So
yeah. You talked earlier about cellular memory.
yeah.
Would you talk to us a little bit more about that memory that is stored within the cells of our body? When you say that, could you just explain about that?
Well, I could probably use an example of a client who came to me to the clinic. Now, so this a client, Paul, he was a bus driver in his mid-50s, and he'd volunteered this particular weekend with the Scouts for their rifle shooting weekend. And this was 3 days prior to him coming to the therapy session to me. And he was left-handed, but they only had at this place right-handed rifles. So he then was sort of forced to shoot with his right hand. But at the end of that day, it caused great pain and sort of pins and needles in his right neck and also his right shoulder area. And then he'd said, it was affecting him driving the bus. Now, on the second day of the weekend, he said he had to shoot with his left hand, even though it was a right-handed gun, just because his hand and his arm was so painful. So he also said that he had some slight pain in his left middle and ring fingers, and that had started about 18 months prior. But what he did say to me, that immediately after the first healing session, so as soon as he'd come off the bed, he said that his shoulder felt completely normal, and that the pains and the pins and needles had completely gone.
Wow.
Now a month later, he came for another session, and he explained that all the cellular memory pains that had arisen in his muscles as a result of the rifle shooting weekend, that they had completely gone and never recurred. But he'd also said that he'd taken up archery 3 months earlier, and that he'd recently been on a day where they'd played archery for 4 hours, and that none of these pains recurred. And also he didn't have any of the discomforts he used to have in his fingers, whereas other people on this course, they still had those pains in their fingers. Now part of the work that I know that Carol has talked about is past life memory. Now, this could well have been a past life memory, perhaps of having been an archer or shooting a rifle, and that memory had stayed within his cells and then had been able to release through the music, you see.
Yeah.
And if I can also just go on to say, some of the things that Paul actually said was that he said everything that was uncomfortable in my body relating to archery prior to the first session has gone, and it feels natural doing archery. There was no tension in my neck and shoulders. This was on the bed. I'm aware all the time of having tension in my neck and shoulders when I'm awake. And he says, my shoulders feel less stiff now after coming off the bed. And he said the harp was like a constant soother and made it more pleasurable and helped me to focus and took me to a different level. The
Wow.
harp is like an external heartbeat rhythm.
Wow. What a beautiful kudo for your work, and just how beautifully said that was, just beautifully written.
Yeah, they were just the words, and I can remember thinking, I must write this down, because he's just saying exactly, obviously, what had happened to him, and described it very well. In
your sessions, do people come to you once? Do you record what you create for them and they take it with them, or how do your sessions work?
Yeah, some people do come once, and some people come, they come once a month, and then, after, say, 6 months, there will be a review period. So it really varies. I don't record the music, though. I don't do that. So it's really one-off in that moment. So.
Yeah. Well, that makes it special and brings the focus more intensely on what's being achieved during that moment. Yeah. Wow. Would you let us hear the other piece that you shared? You'd be willing to share the Swan?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Did you want to say anything about it before we get going, or?
Well, this piece of music, so I had a lot of composed music that I would describe as it came through really between 2004 and 2006. And then after that, I didn't really get a lot of composed music. And then in 2008, it was actually during a period where Jennifer was in Australia at that time with the work, taking the work out there, and this piece of music came through. So it always sort of reminds me of, something positive going on, and going around the world, and so yeah.
Okay, well, here it is. I'm going to get it started. Oh, the Swan, just beautiful. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow.
Actually, I will just say, talking about going around the world, my first harp, the small harp, was the piece of wood. It's mahogany, and it used to be a bar in a pub called the Famous Old Globe Inn in Truro in Cornwall. So it's good story.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And look
Yeah.
how it's transformed.
Yes.
It's there too, dealing from lifting the spirits to lifting the spirits.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's good. Mhm.
Oh, that's just lovely. Why, not why, but I know that you take your music into care homes for the elderly. Tell us a little bit about how that affects the residents. And we've got about 3 minutes.
Right. Well, I know that it really uplifts them. Just watching the instruments being played actually is interesting, and especially for people whose lives have become physically limiting, it's visually pleasing. But studies have revealed that the harp music can actually lower blood pressure, relieve pain, reduce anxiety and depression. And research has shown that music on Alzheimer's disease patients, it can actually improve their mood, their self-expression, their mental processing, their speech, and their sensory stimulation, as well as their motor skills. So quite often when people have dementia, they can be quite agitated, yet it can help them to be calmer. So say when they have visitors or when the staff are relating to them, they can have more meaningful relationships. And what I do is I start with a bit of singing with the mandolin, old favorites, so they can sing along. Then I play the guitar, and that helps them to perhaps be a bit ponderous. And then I play the harp. And then I take a little harp around so they can strum it, and it means a lot. But I just want to tell you a story about a lady, Doris Lamb, and she had Alzheimer's in later life. And I often played the harp to her, and she sometimes played, and she'd get engrossed. And during one session, I said, if you could see music, what do you imagine it would look like? And she gestured her hand in a gentle wave motion and replied, like a film with wings floating on it. The music makes itself, and it cradles me.
Oh, wow. That is just incredible.
Yeah.
I know some of our listeners are thinking, I'm not in the UK. Do you serve clients globally through some type of webinar or not?
I haven't set that up yet, but who knows? Maybe something will come in the future. Yeah.
We need to talk. Rebecca, we're at the end of our show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our guest again is Rebecca Penkett, and you can find her at harpalignment.net. You can find me at mediumtracylockwood.com. And remember,